Good.
You want me to start here? Or start with a roll?
Let's start with roll call.
You want to do roll?
We're just open the agenda.
Okay. We'll now continue the joint hearing on case files PC 25-01, an application for subdivision, PC 25-02, an application for a sensitive land permit in a hillside and erosion overlay, and P 25-002 for a type B variance to transportation improvement requirements.
Just Commission and date, and then do roll call.
This is the Philomath City Planning Commission, and can we do a roll call? Hunsaker,
Oh, you want me to?
well, you want to do like
Yes, you can do
Van Hunsaker,
Here.
John Marlowe,
Here.
Josiah Jessen,
here?
Darlene Rose,
Here.
Kyle Cup.
Here.
All right. Thank you. I want to recognize everybody. Thank you for being available tonight for this continuance and public and our audience. So we will review the case file, title, and summary. As a reminder, this is regarding a property with an unassigned address at the north end of 7th Street, tax lots 3400, 3500, and 5400. The applicant is requesting to subdivide the subject 6.95 acres property into 25 lots for single unit housing, receive a sensitive lands permit due to the steep slopes on the property, and get a type B variance to transportation improvement. Requirements due to the extended length of the dead end street at the end of North 7th Street. The owner is Northernwood LLC. Also want to recognize Commissioner John Barlow, who has been told, has reviewed the video from our last meeting or the notes, and be prepared to participate in this continuance.
Yeah, and I just say, it was a lesson in clear enunciation when you speak. A couple of times the reference to Planning Commission came out Biden Commission.
Ah.
Yeah, I drafted my resignation and someone corrected me.
Okay. At this point, I think we should also just go through the commission declarations just to make sure that we're all clear. So now I ask the members of the Planning Commission to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest, including any site visits. Please indicate the nature and extent of the ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, and indicate whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing.
I did go to the site went up to Quail Land and looked it over.
Again, like since.
Oh, no, not since the last time.
I did, yeah, I just walked around the perimeter as much as I could.
Okay, great. All right, the description of the order of our proceedings tonight. During the previous meeting, we had the number 1, staff report, number 2, additional correspondence, number 3, applicant's presentation, number 4, public testimony in favor of the application, number 5, public testimony in opposition of the application, 6, neutral testimony, 7, rebuttals by the applicant, and number 8, questions for staff from the commission. Excuse me. The request to continue the public hearing today in order so that new testimony was approved by the Planning Commission. So today's proceedings will be as follows. First, new testimony in favor of the application. Second, new testimony in opposition of the application. 3, new neutral testimony, then rebuttals by the applicant of any new testimony, questions for staff from the commission. Then we will close the public testimony. After the record is closed for testimony, no other comments will be heard unless the body reopens the public testimony. Then the commission will deliberate and we'll come to a final decision. At this time, we don't have anyone signed up for public testimony. That's still
We'd still ask the audience, so
Yeah.
I'd go ahead and go down the.
Well, so, we have one in the audience. Okay. Okay, great. Well, since we are below sounds like we're below the number of 5 individuals that want to speak, so we'll allow 5 minutes for each of them. Typically, if we're more than 5 people speaking, we limit it to about 3 minutes, but we're pretty lax about that. We'll first hear those here in person, followed by anyone participating remotely online. For those in attendance, please fill out a testimony form and submit it to the city manager, who's collecting them now. So do we have any testimony? Have anyone signed up to provide testimony remotely? Is there even anyone online?
No, I checked this afternoon at 4 o'clock and we didn't have any request for online appearance.
Okay, then we'll skip that part. Any questions should be addressed through me as the chair. Please state both your name and the city of residence for the record, as the hearing will be recorded. Please keep testimony concise and to the point. We will begin with new testimony in favor of the application. As a reminder, please keep your comments to 5 minutes-ish. I'll first note that we received a letter in support of the applications by Tamara Richmond, a resident of Fulham, which was provided to the commission in the meeting packet and is entered into the record. So we'll call up witnesses.
I mentioned the letter from Timothy.
Yep, and we had a late entry from Timothy Mellott, also in favor of the application. So we'll call up witnesses one at a time, starting with the in favor. You're an Akhtar. Sorry, would you like to speak? Yeah. Go ahead.
You just state your name and your city of residence?
Yep. Well, my name is Akhtar, and I currently live in Corvallis. And I came here in this town for OSU school, so that's got me here, and then I just remain here as a resident. Now, I bought a piece of land over at the North 7. I don't know why you have a pre-existing address there, but it's the 413 and 405 North 7 is part within the open area with the Northernwood developing is part of that within there. And anyway, we bought it like 4 years ago, and we have been paying property tax for it since that time. Even though I'm a renter and I've never owned a home before, and I wish to have my home, to have a home built there. And I'm in favor for Northernwood to develop that because I didn't have the money to put in the main water line. And then the city survey one time told me if I'm willing to wait, then the developing come in and put that, and I'm willing to share the cost with with all of that, with the main line and all of that. And so that's what I'm hoping that I'm able to get to do. And right now I am just kind of in favor for that because I'm waiting for that to be developed. And this whole situation about people opposing it is kind of remind me of what happened at OSU campus, where we have like some green area there, and people, the student opposing it and all of that. They trying to make it into some kind of a restful hangout park. Well, the school was willing to do that, and within a few years, they end up developing anyway, and the student just graduate and move on, and it got nothing to do with anything. I mean, like, nobody ever say anything else, but it seemed like it make a lot of sense that this land here is no larger than a rich person's, estate. And so I don't understand about opposing about some kind of tree, like species and mycorrhizal problem and all that stuff, because this land here is making sense to be developed, because I'm looking at that map up there, and it looked like the existing neighborhood and the housing is already there. And it looked like that just a missing spot where, it need to be complete, and it makes sense, and it's within the city limit, and the people who talking about they want rural area, well, that's what outside the city limit, west of here, going all the way to the coast, that, they can live there if that's rural, because because this is within the city limit, and I don't know why, they just want like some kind of park there or something, because even if you guys agree to the park or whatever, it's gonna be just like OSU. It's gonna stay there, and pretty soon it's gonna get developed anyway. It's just gonna stay a few more year open spot, and it's not gonna get a lot of use from that, and eventually it's gonna be housing there anyway. So I agree with them develop that place so I can start, get some kind of housing there for me there. I've been paying property tax for it there, but I am still also renting. So I'm paying rent and I'm paying property tax to nothing there. And I like to be able to get on with that. And so I'm in favor for that. I'm also an environmentalist, I'm consider myself environmental, but I have, like we're worrying about like ice cap melting or the Amazon get overdeveloped. I'm worrying about the overdevelopment, but this is not it. This is environmental micro management almost. It's like, we're hugging up the wrong tree. I mean, like there are so much, they worrying about a few tree on a forest and they miss the whole forest kind of thing. This is a kind of attitude that's why environmentalists getting a bad name. They thinking environmentalists are like flaky because of all this, micro worrying about all these little things that don't mean anything. It's within the city limit, and I think the city need to grow, just like he said that last time that I was here. The last time I was here, I didn't even get to talk because I didn't know what was going on here. I mean, I even sit on the wrong side. I'm sitting on the opposing side, and so, and that's my comments. I just want it to be developed because it makes sense. It's not that big there. And somebody opposing it, trying to saying it like, you dig up a few things there, the whole ecosystem in Philomath is gonna collapse. It make no sense to me. You know, so that's all I want to say about that.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Next person in favor, Andrea Sullivan. State your name and your city of residence.
My name is Andrea Sullivan and I live here in Philomath. I grew up in this area. I have a deep love for the Willamette Valley. My husband Abraham and I really love Philomath because it's just a really great community that wants to harbor, family values. And right now we live in the upper story of a small home in Philomath. And we want to have our own family, and it's not exactly an ideal situation for having kids in a shared space. So I'm obviously in favor of the subdivision because the housing market here isn't exactly tailored to young families. And the house at the end of 7th Street just sold. It was on the market for 0 days and sold for $15,000 over what they asked. So obviously we can't afford that right now. The subdivision would allow us to live in a community that we love, by a family that we love. Both of our families are rooted in the area, so we want to stay here and be in city limits and be with the community. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all we have in favor. Now we'll hear is there any neutral testimony tonight? No, then we'll move on to testimony opposed. Is this Margaret Mead? Welcome.
My name is Margaret Mead. I live in Philomath. I'm just a bit south of where the development is planned. I just found out about the development very recently because I was told that I live a little bit out of bounds for getting notified about it. So I've looked at the map of the storm drainage system that's coming in. And my backyard is basically where that water I'm at a lower elevation, I believe, than where this building is going to happen. And my concern is that that this will impact my house and 4 more houses south of me, which brings it to the corner of Adelaide and Pioneer. So I'm at 311 Adelaide. And there is a culvert that allows stormwater to go out, you know, from my backyard to, it actually is on my property south of me. Their backyard actually is where the drain is, to go out to Adelaide and get into the city system. And one question I have is, why is there not being like a drainage system being put in on 7th Street? I feel like the drainage that's going to happen from this development is definitely going to impact this little seasonal stream that comes back and comes into my backyard. And why is it allowed to have water, you know, fed this direction to come onto private property? I have questions about the drainage. That's just my interest at this time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that concludes the testimony. Then at this time, does the applicant wish to provide rebuttal or to any of the new public testimony given? Welcome you this time.
To be part of the group.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Linda Howard, Devco Engineering, representing the applicant, Northernwood. And here tonight is owner's representative, Susanna Noel. And sitting beside me is Devco Engineering civil engineer, Trevor Burnell. And he's going to help me address the questions from Ms. Mead for her storm drainage questions. So following the Philomath City Planning staff review of this subdivision application and the coordination efforts made between the city staff and the applicant to achieve the complete application and a proposed approval of the application, with a thorough list of conditions of approval, the applicant wishes to address this new testimony or evidence presented during this continuation hearing process. The applicant would first like to acknowledge the letters received by the city in regards to this proposed land use action. We have record of 3 such letters. As I mentioned before, we'd like to thank Ms. Richmond for her letter in support of the subdivision application. The applicant acknowledges the correspondence from Mr. Malott in support of the land use action. He states the need for housing to meet current demands, the need to provide buildable lots for custom homes of various sizes and styles, single-family homes to provide for all types of family structures. Mr. Malott addresses comments regarding the flora and fauna from the viewpoint of a committee person who has engaged in the evaluation of the subject property. He makes points addressing statements made in the letter of opposition from Ms. Bernardini, pointing to the overall realistic impact of this subdivision project in relationship to the surrounding area. The applicant wishes to thank Mr. Malott for his insightful analysis based on his experience with the City of Philomath processes and familiarity with data. The applicant wants to recognize the letter from Ms. Bernardini in opposition to the project. For clarity's sake, the applicant wishes to address comments contained in the letter. She addresses steep topography and what she describes as engineering feats in relationship to higher home prices. With today's standard engineering practices and the dedication of the applicant to provide buildable lots within the city limits at reasonable prices, it is the goal of the applicant to provide safe, buildable lots, relying on the advice of professional geotechnical and civil engineers, along with professional architecturally designed home plans, to be able to accommodate builders at various economic levels. Any efforts made to get to these safe, buildable lots will have an impact on eventual price of the lots, but it is not the intent of the applicant to market lots above market averages. Regarding the opinion that this land should be left undeveloped, this piece of property is an island of undeveloped land within the urban growth boundary and the city limits. It has been left undeveloped due to the commitment required to pursue development of this property, and not necessarily based on any stated wishes of previous or current owners to leave this area as a natural reserve. Development or activity in any area could cause movement of animals. They will seek locations in areas beyond the edges of development. The attributes which may or may not be present on the site can most likely be said of the area surrounding this project area at one time or another, which now exists as family homes and yards. It is during the city annexation process for this property and the surrounding area when studies were conducted and completed addressing the flora and fauna of this site. Those studies did not find extenuating circumstances on this site which would limit or restrict future development. The site was annexed into the city with an R1 zoning designation and will be developed following that criterion. The city currently has 10 parks ranging in size from pocket parks, community parks, to natural parks, consisting of over 73 acres. This project will contribute to the city park system through the city's park system development fees with development of this subdivision. Through city planning processes, there are 2 new parks being planned on the northern side of Philomath. With that said, it is important to note that processes are in place which motivate city staff to evaluate and take action on needed parks and natural areas. To address the concerns of the existing vegetation being removed for development, there are currently no restrictions to removing vegetation, trees on property under 10 acres within the city limits. The applicant has consulted with an arborist who has assessed the existing vegetation on the site. The applicant has and will take measures to preserve existing vegetation as much as practicable. The applicant will also prepare and submit to the city a site revegetation landscape plan to comply with the recommendations of the arborist report. Addressing the comment about other lands available for development, other lands are not available to this applicant. The application addresses the proposed land use site and is not tied to other lands which may or may not be available for development with the R1 single-family zoning as this project is. The city staff have inventoried and evaluated lands within the urban growth boundary and have determined that this site is appropriately designated at the R1 zoning designation. We'd like to thank today's oral testimony in support of this land use application. And with that, I would like to have Trevor just quickly address the concerns about the storm draining situation.
Yeah, so as Linda said, I'm Trevor Brunel with Devco Engineering, civil engineer there. So stormwater concerns, very valid, and appreciate when they get brought up because it gives me something to So first of all, like the reason that the drainage plan shows following that ditch beyond the private properties is because that's the natural path that the stormwater was already taking. So we're planning to connect to that existing ditch. We're going to do our downstream analysis, ensure that that ditch has capacity for our flows, and then the flows as well from the developed site do have to be detained. They're going to be outletted at the existing rate that the site already has, and it could even be a little bit less because we do have large pond size. But either way, so it's going to be the same outflow that we have now from the site. To address the comment about going down 7th Street, it does look like a good option, although that option's not prescribed by the city, and it's also, as far as I know, it might not be in the city's master plan. Either way, it's not something that we were directed to do or look at during the design process so far, and there's not an existing stub that goes up high enough to collect that. So we're gonna have the detention, keep the flows where they're at, and then the downstream analysis will be performed, and any deficiencies in the ditch or any culverts will need to be addressed as part of this development to ensure that there's not going to be any overflow or flooding risks for the prescribed stormwater rainfall rate, which I believe is a 25-year storm for City of Philomath. So happy to answer any questions that.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
at this time, we're gonna move into, first of all, thank you for your testimony. That's all you have.
It's okay, I'll get follow-up questions from them, that's okay.
Yeah, so should we switch these two then?
No, just gonna just add questions for the applicant while they're there, that's fine.
So, yeah, sorry, Ben.
Oh, that's okay.
Clarifying questions.
In terms of, as you mentioned, the stormwater, probably down 7th Street is where it's an unimproved street. There are no storm drainage system there. But if the city were to fully improve that section, up to the development, which I would hope, that would happen at some point, with what you've planned, does that seem like that would probably work into funneling into that?
Yeah, if that,
I mean, I wish it's an engineering question, but
yeah, if that's what the city engineer decides to do when they develop 7th Street, it does make sense to me. There will be the ability to connect just from our pond, and then basically cut it off at the culvert and route it back down 7th. If that ever happens, it would be an option.
yeah, that's what I figured that, but I just wanted to hear that.
Yeah, if I understood Ms. Mead's testimony correctly, there's a culvert that's actually on her property. Adjacent property, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Does that figure in when you're thinking about the configuration of the system to eliminate the stormwater? Is that culvert a part of that plan, or is what you're proposing going to somehow bypass that and alleviate her concern in that way, or?
I don't have the map of like the entire down.
Yeah, I was trying to visualize it too.
We have it surveyed all the way, and it does. So there's I think there's 2 culverts in some backyards, and there's a ditch that runs the entire way, and it does eventually outlet into a big, like a really oversized catchment.
That's correct.
And it outlet to, I believe, Adelaide, and it's like a 30-something inch pipe. So the pipe's not the concern down there. We're running the analysis to make sure the culverts in between, and I do have a suspicion that some of those are going to need to be replaced. But we do have all the data for everything that up until Adelaide Street, and that's what's going to need to be analyzed to make sure it all has capacity.
Yeah, and I think to directly answer, yes, that ditch culvert system between the south of this project and Adelaide is part of the system that we're proposing. It's the current drainage for all of that area up there. It all channels down and drains through there now. And so this system will detain any runoff from this project in the pond that we're proposing. And then the pond will release water that's being stored there at a prescribed rate that is matches the existing rate of flow that's going through that ditch right now.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions for you, if I may.
Sure.
You mentioned in Ms. Bernardini's testimony about the number of trees that would be removed. And her letter cites a total of 429 trees on the acreage that's proposed to be developed. Her oral testimony suggested that 246 of those trees are going to be removed. Is that your understanding as well, or I gather she drew those conclusions from the arborist report that was part of the packet?
That's probably pretty accurate. We have a significant amount of infrastructure that will go in with this project, both the northern and the southern portions. We have a full street section, a street stub with a mid-block crossing on the north end, and then a full cul-de-sac on the south end, and which are all required, along with the utility infrastructure, storm, sewer, water. So all of that will go in, and part of the trees will be removed so that those improvements can be put in place. And then when the improvements are put in, there's also the grading to meet existing grades from the new improvements. So some of the trees will be removed during that process as well.
Then my last question, I thought I understood you to say that the properties that are going to be constructed, that the residences are going to be constructed, that the developer does not intend to market those above market averages. Is that?
The conversations we have had with the applicant, this is going to be a subdivision that will provide homes to all different economic levels. They actually have family that are going to be putting homes for themselves in this area. And their intent stated to us was that this is not a giant money-making project.
By market average, do you mean average price of a residence in Philomath, or
Yes.
average price in the county, or?
I was thinking of Philomath, yeah.
Do you have a sense of what that number is?
Chris, do you know?
Talking last month or this month?
Yeah,
Well, I've seen
it
data.
changes all the time.
I have a realtor friend who sends me quarterly data. His last quarter report for the quarter ending March 31st was the average sale price of a home in Philomath was $460,000. Does that sound right?
I was thinking around 400, so it could be.
I was thinking even higher than that.
I was hoping for that.
It depends on the style and the size of the home.
The
No, it's very.
home pricing and lot pricing is not really part of criteria that we're looking at, so
I was curious, and that's
curiosity is good. I just wanted to just put it out there that we want to try to stick to the criteria that we're looking at. And it's interesting to know what things will go for, but there's a lot of work to do and a lot of time that goes by between now and then. And so
Appreciate it. And that was my last question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we need to recognize Commissioner Coulter Mitchell. Welcome.
Apologies for being late.
Yeah, no problem at all. But before we move forward, I think we should just quickly run through any declarations. Finding my page.
Josiah, but I just thought of something. I was just wondering about, is there going to be an HOA and there won't?
Let's hold off on that question just till we get through this just a second.
Okay.
So Sarah, really quick, do you have any ex parte contacts, bias, conflict of interest, including site visits? And if so, please indicate the nature and extent of the ex parte contact, bias, conflict of interest, and whether you intend on participating or abstaining from the hearing.
I have no conflicts.
Thanks. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Go ahead.
So I was just wondering if there will be an HOA that would give some kind of guidance toward home design.
The last discussion with the applicant was that they were not planning on an HOA.
And did I understand right that you have some people who are interested in buying a lot and then building their own homes rather than being part of a?
I don't have personal knowledge of that, but
I might have.
yeah, I don't know where anything in that respect stands at this moment in time.
Okay.
I'm going to direct the commission, and please, let's point our questions towards clarifying questions directed towards the application. That's what we're trying to get at this point. Does the staff have any, or does the commission have any additional questions for staff this time?
I had one last one for them.
Hopefully it's in line with the application.
Yes. Yep. In the application, and as a result of all the discussion and the letter, regarding habitat and trees and all that, I went and looked through that, and in here, it indicates that about, I guess it was here in your report on page 17, it says per city staff, no wildlife habitat or area exists on the project site. But then in the code, it says unidentified natural resources, newly identified natural resources, including wildlife and wildlife habitat sites, shall be addressed in the following manner. And you indicate that if we need to do that, or we decide you need to do that, you're open to doing it. So I just wanted to make sure that's what you meant. I know you said it, but.
There, during the initial phases of putting together the application and talking with city staff, there was no indication from staff that there were any inventoried wildlife, et cetera, on the site, at least not to the extent where the city required the applicant to do those studies.
But you said you would do it if we decided so. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
We'll talk about it and deliberate. I just wanted you to agree with what you said, but apparently you don't want to do that.
Well, I guess that would be up to the applicant.
You're the one that said it, I didn't.
If a study is required, then we will
Yeah.
study.
Yeah.
Okay. Does staff wish to respond to any questions or issues raised by the testimony received?
I'll just add one comment in response to the stormwater. I just want to make sure we clarify it. Trevor does a great job, but he's super smart and he uses some jargon that maybe others aren't as familiar with. So I'm just going to keep it very clear for me. When new property develops, it's always a concern that that stormwater that used to soak into the ground is now going to hit a roof, hit a blacktop, and come storming down the hill. State law as well as city code requires that water be retained on site. So they're building a storm detention pond that's going to collect that water. And it's the purpose of that storm detention is to not allow the water to travel downhill any faster at any higher rate than it would have done prior to the development going in there. And so that's the point of that storm detention pond, is to make sure that nobody downhill is getting flooded with all that new stormwater that's running off all the roofs and stuff. So I understand the concern. There's a lot of smart engineers that do that. After the subdivision gets to a point where there's an approval, the next step for the property owner is going to be to meet with the city engineers and their engineers and make sure that all those little details get carved out. The size of the detention pond is sufficient. The rate of drainage is correct, and it's not any higher than what it is now. So I get the concern. I just want to make it very clear that they'll address that. I mean, they've already kind of addressed it. The city engineer already has some comments in there that the stormwater or the storm system will meet the city's requirements. That's kind of what it's pointing to, is those future discussions, those future calculations, a lot of which have already been done. And there's some preliminary design, but that final design will get checked so that downhill, downstream properties aren't flooded out by the new development. And that's all I really want to add. Just wanted to make sure that was clear for everybody.
Okay, great, thank you. And thank you for your testimony. Is there anything further you want to add? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. The commission has not received a request for continuance. At this time, there is no request to hold the record open at this time. Being so, I think we need to ask the applicant if they waive the right to submit additional written argument. Does the applicant waive its 7-day period to submit final written argument after the closing of the record? Thank you very much. I will now close the public record and wipe the sweat. Now the commission will deliberate on the evidence and testimony we received. Anybody want to start?
You want a motion on the floor before we deliberate?
No
or-
motion, just
Okay.
deliberating.
Okay.
We'll make a motion soon enough.
I'll start, I guess.
All right.
Okay. The main concern I have, and probably at this point, there's nothing we can do about it, is 7th Street wouldn't be extended like it's supposed to be. In all our comprehensive plan, our transportation systems plan, our code all says that 7th Street should be extended to, so that you have connection between streets. Basically, the Quail Glen subdivision to the east of it kind of has precluded that. We should have had something done there so that it would be able to connect. And looking at the pictures of it, you'd probably have to remove 2 or 3 houses in order to do it. That's why even back in the 90s, there was supposed to have been a stub put there. But other than the fact that we should have done that, we can't really do anything about it now. Unless we was to require them to put a stub over to that east side, and, the city probably buy 2 or 3 houses and put the road in like it should have been done. But that's not realistic, but it is something I want to talk about beyond this hearing. The next thing I wanted to touch bases about was the sewer lines. There was discussion about the sewer lines coming down 7th Street. They are all old, and there was a requirement in there that the developer would have that videoed. Has that been done, Chris?
Public Works shot a video in there
Okay.
recently.
Okay.
There were a couple of trouble spots and worry spots that they'll have to address when they get on with the engineers and talking what needs to get done. But yeah, we're having problems with our equipment right now too, so
But they've videoed it and kind of have an idea of what's may need to be done. Okay. Well, and that, I understand when that work starts to be, like you were talking about, the engineering with the stormwater. So they'll have that discussion. I was concerned about it for the applicant because we have a lot of old sewer lines in our city, and some of them aren't in very good shape. And I wouldn't want you to go into doing something that, we might have to replace, 500 feet of sewer line. Okay, but if they've already done it, that was my only concern.
yeah. And I'll take that as a question. If the current sewer line that the city owns in the street is in disrepair, then the city will fix that sewer line, right? It's not really the applicant's place to come in and correct an existing error. If it was undersized, then the applicant may be required to upsize it. But if it's just an old pipe that the city's let go into disrepair, the city would need to bring that up to good repair so they could hook into it. That wouldn't be on the developer.
Oh, no, I wasn't
On the city.
saying that, but
The city's hopeful that the line is in good enough repair or that it could be repaired without too much expense so they can hook it.
And the last one was on this significant tree thing that I asked about. once I saw that, I went and reviewed the arborist report, and based on that, what we call significant trees, they're they're 12 inches or more. There is a whole series of requirements if we choose to require them to do it, to determine if there were some of them that need to be saved in particular or not. And I do believe that probably there are some, and that could make a difference. I don't know going through the process exactly what it state or what would happen because of it, going through that process, but it includes letting DSL know that we have significant trees that may be cut down for this proposal. We also have an ordinance that says it doesn't really matter. We have an ordinance literally that says after it talks about saving as many trees as you can and everything, but a developer can actually come in and cut down all of them if they want to. If they need to build a house there, if they need to put in a road, it does, in a sense, it doesn't really matter. But where DSL gets involved with it, it could matter. And I'm going to make a motion that about that, because it should have been done in the first, or mentioned in the first place. But I move that due to the fact that there are significant trees identified by the applicant's arborist, the applicant shall complete such procedures contained in our code, which includes 18.55, the overlay zone, the 18.70 landscaping, and the 18.85 hillside erosion control overlay zone. And it actually, the overlay zone, the erosion control makes all this happen. And so I'm making that we add that as a condition of approval.
All right, I'd like to deliberate on that motion. So,
It needs a second before this deliberation.
okay, anybody like to second?
I'll second.
So then on that note, so you're making a motion so that we would perform this study.
The applicant, but,
The applicant would.
well, I assume the city would be involved too, but in it, like I said, this DSL would even be involved with.
Right, but you're making this motion as a criteria of approval,
Condition of approval.
condition
yeah.
of approval. So if we approve it,
Right.
then they do that, and then what happens with the results? We let the cards fall where they may?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't know how it would turn out.
Yeah.
But based on what our code says, that we should require this be done, to be done.
Is that encompassed by, I'm looking at special condition for approval, or
Okay.
not special, recommended conditions of approval. I'm at page 33 of the packet.
No, it's not in the packet at all.
That's in the code.
I'm
No,
reading.
no, I'm not talking about the code. I'm just talking about your concern. Is it encompassed by condition 17 on page 33? That requires the applicant to provide an updated landscape plan, and then a list information be provided. You go over the page and it includes other tree and native species planting shall follow the recommendations of the vegetation and arborist report. No trees shall be removed prior to approval by the city of such inventory.
No.
That doesn't do it.
They've already done the inventory.
Does the city approve that as part of the?
Yeah, what they've submitted has been approved.
So you would want to add, that would be condition 24, I guess, to the.
Right, whatever the next number would be. No, it'd be, 25, 26. Oh, how many?
There's 23.
23?
Is
Oh,
that 34?
20,
Yeah.
that'd be 20, 34.
So I up and did not bring my code book, but Van, just for, maybe for the record, would you mind reading from the code just so that I know what I'm voting on, what you're motioning from our code, please.
Okay. From the landscaping, chapter 18.70, it's titled significant vegetation. Significant vegetation means significant trees and shrubs, individual trees and shrubs with trunk diameter of 12 inches or greater, as measured 4 feet above the ground, DBH. And the arborist has that in there. And all plants within the drip line of such trees and shrubs shall be deemed significant. Other trees may be deemed significant. Well, I'll read it. This part doesn't matter. Other trees may be deemed significant when nominated by property owners and designated by the Planning Commission as heritage trees. Then the number 2 under that, sensitive lands, trees and shrubs on sites that have been designated as sensitive lands in accordance with chapter 18.55 due to slope, natural resource areas, wildlife habitat, and chapter 18.85 hillside and erosion control overlays shall be protected. And then it goes into how that process works. So that's where, in terms of what I'm suggesting, we need to require where that all begins. But yeah, then it's based on what I said. And like I said, it goes through all the things you got to do. If you want, I could read all through that. But
Shall be protected though. That sounds like anything that's greater than 12 inches in diameter.
well, I don't know that. I say that I don't know that. I don't know what DSL will say based on the fact that elsewhere, and if I probably have it here somewhere, but elsewhere in the code, as I said earlier, it does say that I was kind of overstating it, but that for roads, houses, for water and sewer lines and all that, that any tree that's in the way can be cut down. So in a sense, it doesn't, in a way, it may not mean anything. But I don't know what DFL says based on that. It could mean that they might have to reorganize it because this tree or that tree, I don't know. I've never been involved with what transpires there. So I can't say that I know what happened. I just know that it says that we should require that be done. Yeah.
Christian?
Yeah, so just going back on the staff report that Michael prepared, that I reviewed and approved, there's an analysis done there. It cites very clearly the requirement for the protected trees, and it also states the comment that Commissioner Hunsick, you're saying that if a tree is identified as being in the way of where a house needs to go or development, a road, access road, whatever it needs to be, there's no protection for that tree if the lot's less than 10 acres. Lots larger than 10 acres, that was the line where the planning commission drew the line and say if it's more than 10 acres, then all that has to be done ahead of time and those trees can be protected. But if it was less than 10 acres, the rule was from the planning commission that development needs to take priority over trees when those trees are in the way of development. For the hillside development standards, there's a full analysis that Michael did in the development standards. The erosion study that was done clearly shows trees that are significant and required to maintain or reduce the erosion. It also produces a plan and a strategy for new plantings of new vegetation that will take care of that. So the analysis is there, and the recommendation in the staff report is that the application complies with the city's development code and it complies with this additional permit for the erosion control. So I don't believe that there's anything at either Department of State Lands or Department of Land Conservation and Development that reviews our development code and approves our development code, that there's anything then there that would put us contrary to any state law. So I'm very comfortable that they've met this criteria as stated in the staff report.
Well, I don't. You want me to read more? I'll pull some more up. Mapping and protection required. Significant vegetation shall be mapped as required by Chapter 18.110, Development Review and Site Design Review, Chapter 18.55, Overlay Districts. Significant trees shall be mapped individually and identified by species and size, which the arborist did do. A protection area shall be defined around the edge of all branches, drip line of each tree, and drip lines may overlap between trees. The city will also require an inventory survey or assessment prepared by a qualified professional when the city deems it necessary to determine vegetation boundaries, building setbacks, and other protection or mitigation requirements. So that part really right there says you can make them avoid significant trees. It says all of the following protection standards shall apply to significant vegetation areas. Protection of significant trees identified as meeting the criteria in B1, which was the very first thing I said. This section shall be retained unless it prevents development of public streets, utilities, and land uses permitted by applicable land use district. And as that's what I had said earlier. Developer shall pay for removal of significant trees in an amount set by city council by resolution. Sensitive lands. This section of sensitive land shall be protected in conformance with provisions of 18.55. 18.55. Unidentified natural resources. Newly identified natural resources, including wildlife and wildlife habitat, shall be addressed in the following manner. A lot of it is the very same thing, so I won't read every bit of it. The provisions of the natural resource overlay zone do not exempt persons or property from state or federal laws that regulate protected land, water, wetlands, or habitat areas. In addition to the restrictions and requirements of this section, all proposed development activities wholly or partially within the area identified as wetlands, also subject to DSL standards and approval. Chris, we asked the DSL about their standards and approval. Did they give us approval for it? If the answer is no, we need to have them do that.
No, we don't do that for developments of this size.
I've just read to you that our code says we have to do it.
Aspects of our code do, other aspects of it say that they don't. So the planning commission can make a decision if you want to have this property be protected with trees and limit development for housing, or if you want to maximize development for housing and not protect the trees. The Philomath Development Code will allow for both. So if we want to develop housing, we can develop housing. If we want to preserve trees, we can do that.
And I'll keep reading.
Well,
The city shall provide notice to the Division of State Lands, the applicant, and the owner of record in 5 working days of the acceptance of any complete application for subdivision. Of course, you guys didn't do that. Building permits for new structures, other development. This says the city is required to do it. If you say we don't have to, if we don't feel like it, I'll call them tomorrow.
Is that Department of State Lands or Department of Land Conservation Development?
Division of State Lands. I'm only asking us to do what our damn code says.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break, cool off, and we can come back and continue deliberations. You ready? All right, bring the meeting back to order. I want to remind the commission that we are currently deliberating over a motion to add another recommended condition of approval. Is everybody on the same page, or do we need?
May I get a point of clarification?
Sure.
That's a good question. So if I'm understanding correctly, there, in the code, it says that significant trees need to be protected. But the code also says that if the acreage is under 10 acres, that the developer, those trees don't need to be protected. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, it does say that.
Thank you.
If I could address the concern on Department of State lands, I think this is a part of our code being a little bit outdated and some of the words being a little mixed. So I'm going to read into this a little bit. First and foremost, still refers to as Division of State Lands, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now a Department of State Lands. This section of the code is more generally being applied to wetlands. Wetlands, streams, riparian corridors do require notification of Department of State Lands, and the city does that consistently. Any property that's affecting Department of State Land or that's affecting a riparian corridor or wetland has jurisdiction over Department of State Lands. So that notification is given to them as required. I'm looking at 185530 letter B. If you read it in its entirety, says Division of State Lands, which again is now Department of State Lands. Applicant, owner of record within 5 working days of the acceptance of any complete application for subdivisions, building permits for new structures, other development permits and approvals that allow physical alteration of land. This includes excavation and grading permits or removal of fill or both, or development in floodplains and floodways. This provision does not apply if the permit from DSL has been issued for the proposed activity. So it's not exclusive to that, but a lot of this overlay language comes from Department of State Lands, and that's the protections that they wanted in local code for wetland properties. More generally, the city can apply this to other protected things. If you go up above, it talks about wildlife habitat that's been identified, again, riparian corridors, significant wetlands. Those are the first items it hits on. So again, I would argue if the city wanted to go to the extent of protecting, well, there's different laws, but significant wetlands, riparian corridors are required to go to Department of State Lands. Wildlife habitat, we've never had a requirement from Department of State Lands in the 12 years I've been here to report development that could impact wildlife habitat, because that's essentially any development could have an impact on wildlife habitat. Unidentified natural resources, I don't know how you notify anybody if it's an unidentified natural resource, because it's not been identified. So it goes through. So this section, it needs some updating. Again, I think we could use the section if we wanted to do some additional protection there, but our code's very clear in other sections, in the landscaping section and the development section, that if it's over the 10 acres, there's no requirement that the planning commission has to impose, whether the city has to impose preservation of those trees. If there's a house that needs to go there or access to a house, those trees can be removed. I think the applicant has gone to the extent of hiring a professional consultant to come in to look at this topography, to look at the trees, and to provide some assurance to the developer and to the city that if those trees are removed, if those trees are removed, we're not going to have the big hill landslides and those other concerns. And there's recommendations in there for plantings and other things to help prevent that as well. And so what the city will be looking is to require them to follow that recommendation as is in there. And that is in there as a condition of approval already. So I feel like we're covered. I feel like the language on reporting to DSL is more specific, at least today, to wetlands or riparian corridors and not to these other things that I've never heard of reporting those things to DSL. I don't think they would even know what to do with it if I did report it to them.
I have a question, Ben. So if we did request Department of State Lands to get involved,
to review this subdivision or this development. What is it that you're hoping to receive from them? Are you hoping to receive like a map of significant trees that we could then identify as heritage trees or untouchable trees, or like what is the goal?
My goal is to do what our code says to do. I take umbrage with the city manager suggesting that either we develop or save all the trees, or however he said it. The applicant has said they would do this if required. I don't even know why we're having this argument about it. It says to do it. Chris indicates, oh, it's all to do with floodplains and floodways and such. It says it includes them. It doesn't mean these are the main things that we have this in here. We include that as well, meaning kind of afterthought, not that that's the main thing. That we haven't done it in the last 12 years. I guess I or whoever else has been on the planning commission hasn't looked at these things and said, it says to do it. What I would find from it, if we notified DSL and they said, as Chris kind of iterated, that, well, we don't care, then that's it. That's the end of it. I don't know what they would do. I'm just reading what it says in our code, and I just want us to follow our code. That's all I want us to do. I mean, that if we need, Chris feels like we need to change it, then I guess we need to change it. But we have what we have now, and I think we should follow it. I mean, the unidentified was, I mean, it wasn't identified to me until the lady, sent us that letter. So that's when it was identified, as far as I'm concerned. And so that, like I say, I don't know why. I mean, for me, it's pretty simple. I think we should just do what our code says. If the next time around we need to change it, then we change it. Or if we feel like that's appropriate. I don't know. And
Questions? John?
I guess direct this to Chris, and I'm looking at 18.55020, the overlay zone that Van referred to. Subsection C that deals with wildlife habitat refers to the city taking inventory and determining significant wildlife habitat. And it refers to following a safe harbor methodology. Has the city done that? Do we have an inventory of wildlife habitat?
No.
Never?
No.
So by definition, we don't have, I mean, for example, the 7 acres that are subject of this hearing aren't identified as significant wildlife habitat.
Correct.
I mean, we have heritage trees designated within the city limits.
Yeah, but that's nowhere in I think we just added that section to our development code within the last couple of years, and that was just to highlight trees of significance to the community, but it wasn't a matter of how, I mean, there's a criteria for being there, but that's more of a.
So the tree commission just goes out and hangs a ribbon? Like?
No, the landowner or anybody can submit, they have to get the approval of the landowner, but they can submit a tree to be recognized as a heritage tree, but there's no protections for that tree. The homeowner can still go out there and cut it down the next day. It's more of a, look at these trees that have significant meaning to the city, and we're gonna put them on the map, and you can do a bike route and go look at them, but there aren't any additional provisions or protections for those trees just because they're on the tree heritage list. So it's not a protected area, like a protected habitat or a protected tree species or anything.
Chris, can I ask a follow-up question to that? When was the last time the building code was updated, or the zoning and subdivision? As a new commissioner, it might be a funny question or.
Yeah, I mean, different aspects of it get updated, every 2 to 3 years or so. Seems like every year we try to get something in front. We're overseeing the Chuckles because we're doing a fairly extensive overhaul of our residential, commercial, and industrial development. And at this point, we're a little bit behind, we're way behind schedule on the time we thought it would get taken done just due to staffing issues and other constraints. So we're a little behind, hence the Chuckles. But no, historically, about every year, we bring different items to the planning commission to review, and we update it section by section as needed.
So I noted that you changed the Department of State Lands in the code is references division. So yeah, okay, Ben showed me that something that was done, or this particular section was 2003. So,
The rest of our meetings that aren't public hearing focused on updating. That's pretty much all.
Well, just a comment in my way of deliberation. I don't think we can. I'm thinking, what would the enforcement mechanism be if we decided to make the assumption that the staff report ignored the code in making its recommendation and writing its 23 conditions for approval? Then we're kind of saying, well, then do we go to the Department of State Lands? And again, what does the state lands do? I don't think that. I have two concerns. One is, if the city has not identified this 7 acres as significant wildlife habitat, then I don't think that concern applies. And so I'm not going to support the motion. The second question, I think it denies our applicants due process if we, at this committee, and you've heard my opinions on whether we're deliberating or legislating. And I think there's a concern here that if we try to, maybe the code needs rewriting, but we don't rewrite it case by case. We don't spot zone. We try to avoid islands. And in this case, I just don't think we should be legislating in the context of an up or down vote on this application. So I'm going to vote against the motion.
If I may. This is what this body does. We review staff reports, we review applications, and then we deliberate and make decisions. Now, as you're saying, you're not going to vote for it, and that's okay. But we're not legislating. As I'm requesting, that we apply our code and basically apply it fairly. You almost suggested that we weren't we were legislating and not actually applying it fairly. Applying it fairly is doing what it says. Not applying it fairly is ignoring things. And in this case, there's not any question about what it says. And so if you ignore it, then you're culpable as well. You're saying that, oh, I'm going to be nice to them and not make them do what it says to do. And that's, what would you call it, favoritism? I don't know what you would call it, but it certainly is that. I don't have any problem expecting them to do what our code says. I don't have any problem with that. If it said something different, then that would be okay. But it doesn't.
Well, not to belabor it, but I don't think it's favoritism. My definition of justice is you treat like situations in a like way. And every case that's come before us as a planning commission has involved cutting down trees, probably removing places where birds used to nest, probably disrupting deer paths. And we have not ever imposed the requirement that you're suggesting on an applicant. So it's not favoritism, it's avoiding injustice by my lights. But I go back to my original point is I don't think the quoted section applies unless, you can, in some other context, we or the city council could hold staff feet to the fire and say, we want you to do that inventory and tell us where the habitat, the protected habitat zones are within the city. But we haven't done that. And so when I say legislating, I'm saying, okay, we are in the context of this hearing trying to create, on the strength of one person's letter, a determination that this is a protected wildlife zone or habitat.
Until the DSL would rule on it, you wouldn't know.
And that's my question about enforcement, but I'm not comfortable doing it that way. I'm not saying your way is the wrong way. I'm just, in this context, I think I'm uncomfortable.
I'll just state again, we've never had the requirement from the state or otherwise to do a report of tree preservation, wildlife preservation, that within city limits. Department of State Lands has a very clear report. It's actually online, login for riparian corridors and wetlands. No such reporting system exists for tree protection, habitat protection, animal wildlife protection. It doesn't exist. So I don't know if, again, this is old code that's antiquated, but my professional experience is we have never been required by the state or anybody else for any subdivision that we've done. I would say in my 12 years here and probably the 10 years prior to that with the same planner, who taught me how to interpret the city's code and implement it for the subdivisions, we have never gone to the state and given a report on anything other than wetlands, riparian corridors, and that future development there. So I think there is something to be consistent with how we've interpreted and executed our code.
And the only thing I would say with that is if there's absolutely no reason why we should require this be done, literally, if we approve this, you would get on the phone tomorrow and your expectation would be is they would say, no, we don't care. And that would be the total end of the story. The total. It wouldn't go one step further because it's only them that would have this concern because the city don't care. So that's the other thing. That why we're even having this argument is beyond me.
Well, we're deliberating on the motion.
Yeah.
So is there any other
I'm good
deliberation?
with the vote.
How about we bring it to a vote? You want to state the motion again, just so that we're clear, Van, or you want to?
Oh, sure. So I had said, I move that due to the fact there are significant trees identified by the applicant's arborist, the applicant shall complete such procedures contained in our code, including 18.55 overlay zones, 18.70 landscaping, and 18.85 hillside erosion control overlay zones as a condition of approval.
Second. All in favor?
I
Opposed? No.
I will call the DSL.
Okay. I look forward to hearing
Yeah,
what you do that, because we definitely need to talk about updating that portion of our code. Let's save that for another meeting. Is there any other deliberation the commission would like to make on the application or any of the testimony we have received?
yes.
Yes, Commissioner Hunsaker.
Tract A, the stormwater retention pond, the city says that the applicant's HOA would be responsible for maintaining that. The applicants has stated tonight that they're not going to have an HOA. I didn't know that. I just assumed that they were. But
Where does it say that, man? I don't see that in the
this
recommended conditions of approval. Oh,
well, it's in their
engineer's
evaluation.
report.
No, it was in their evaluation. Anyway, where they're not going to have it,
Oh,
I
right.
want,
Limitation part, yeah. Okay, I'm with you. Sorry.
where they're not going to do it. I was coming tonight to say, well, I don't want an HOA maintaining um, detention ponds that the city of Philomath are responsible for drainage. The HOAs aren't responsible for drainage. The city of Philomath is absolutely the organization that is responsible for drainage. And if an HOA, which most of us are probably familiar with, they don't really do much unless it's about whether you plant a tree on your property or something. But I want to make sure that the city is responsible for those detention ponds and how they operate. And since, you know, there's not going to be an HOA, which would mean, based on what the city says, nobody will be responsible for it. But I just want us, you know, Chris to know that, yeah, we will be responsible for it. And that's all about that one.
And do you, just before we move on real quick, do you remember which section it was in?
Oh, where was,
Where the city engineer mentioned that a HOA, or I forgot the language you used.
Yeah.
Be overseeing that.
Oh.
20 or 22.
I've got little notes in my,
I see something on page 18.
Yeah.
Been provided with a recorded detention easement and maintenance agreement per city standards. I don't know if that's the section because it doesn't mention HOA at all, but
I can address that.
it says all weather maintenance access shall be provided to all public storm manholes and other structures unless otherwise approved by Public Works.
again, it's not something to do with the condition of approval. I'm just talking about it in terms of city operations.
Okay.
And so it's not a,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Not,
Just a point of clarification.
yeah.
Did you want to respond to that? You good? Okay. Do you have anything further? Any other deliberation you guys want to continue on the application? All good? Okay. All right, final section. Is there a motion to amend any of the findings in the staff report? A motion? Is there a motion to adopt the findings in the staff report, including any revised language identified this evening, and approve the application?
I can read it as well as anybody. I move to approve the application for the Knoll Heights subdivision PC 25-01 and the type B variance for the length of a cul-de-sac P 25-02 and the hillside and erosion control overlay / special lands permit PC 25-02 based on the findings of fact and with conditions of approval as contained in the staff report dated May 8, 2025.
Second.
I believe there's an updated motion. Sorry, John.
Is the
I have no pride of authorship, so.
I want to make sure we get things, sorry.
Updated from May 8th.
It may just be the, no, you're right, sorry. In my mind, it was, the variance and the cul-de-sac, or the variance and the erosion were switched, but you read them as they're stated, so you're fine. Thank you, sorry. I want to make sure the variance was captured in.
No, thank you for checking.
Okay, then just for note, after a motion's been moved and seconded, the commission can, 1, approve the application, number 2, approve the application with modifications, or number 3, deny the application. Any deliberation on the motion on the page?
Clarify that the second, right? Darlene, okay.
I'll make a comment. I will be voting simply because we didn't follow our code in reviewing this process or application.
Okay, let's vote on it. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. No. Opposed? The application passes. Any participant that is not satisfied with this decision may appeal to the city council within 21 days of the date of this decision. Thanks again, everyone, for sticking with us for this process. I think we figured it out. We got it there and appreciate everyone's diligence. Thanks. So, this meeting's adjourned.